What's going on, everybody? This is Ryan Neal from Bonsai Mirai outside of Portland, Oregon, and this is the Bonsai Time podcast.
Hey everyone, this is your host Kevin. Welcome to the Bonsai Time podcast, a place for history, horticulture, and having fun. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been here from the beginning, thank you so much for being a part of this amazing community. If you got feedback, ideas, or suggestions, send them our way at bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to hang out with us in real time, jump into our Discord channel, Bonsai Time Podcast Chat. This episode is sponsored by Chris Mead, a longtime listener and friend based out of Columbus, Ohio. Today's episode is a special one. My co-host Ryan Huston and I sat down with Ryan Neal of Bonsai Mirai, just outside of Portland, Oregon. We dive into bonsai life, apprenticeships, family, purpose through the art, and so much more. Let's jump in, and remember, bonsai on. Juniper's first dentist appointment today, and it's been snowing since 8 this morning, and the high today was 34 degrees, and in 6 hours we had 4 inches.
Damn. That's Massachusetts, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Miguel is driving a truck across the country right now. So when he left New York, Chicago was just starting to get snow, and I was like, oh gosh. But he's well versed in the arts of cross country travel.
Yeah. Those winds, the prevailing winds in Wyoming are always the scariest, no matter what time of year.
For sure. Yeah.
I swear.
Yeah. I don't know if he took 80 or 90. He was going to make that call once he got out onto the plains. Clean bill of health on the dental visit.
Yeah. Kumi, as you know, my wife, she's very stringent on the nightly cleaning. And the dentist was really happy to see that. So they gave us a good pass, and it was like the coolest dental office. They had little tokens for like the little machines that kids use for quarters. And he's like, oh,
Right.
here's 2 tokens. I was like, oh, pretty gnarly. I was like, hell yeah.
Can I get a few of those?
I was like, I want one. Like,
Yeah,
there's some
totally.
cool stuff in there. I was like, man,
Oh man.
why can't adult dentists do that? Like, that'd be awesome.
Oh my gosh. Totally tap into nostalgia.
For real. It sells. It's a selling point these days.
Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, everybody's trying to relive their childhood.
Can't blame them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first thing, we have 2 Ryans on.
Yeah, I figured that would be confusing, but
I
we'll
was
deal
thinking
with it.
saying Houston or Doc, but then Kumi's like,
Yeah.
he's not a doctor yet. He doesn't deserve the title.
She's right. I can't accept that.
So I'll say RH. Does that work?
Oh, you could say Houston, whatever.
All
Yeah.
right, that's easy.
Yeah, I had a
Yeah.
gym teacher in elementary school who used to call me Houston, so I'm a little used to that. But
It's probably more yelling, right? Like, Houston.
yeah. But he was a funny guy, so he got away with it.
Nice.
Houston's not a bad nickname.
Yeah. I get a lot of Houston, we have a problem. And
Yeah, naturally, right? Yeah.
exactly.
But
yeah,
Faris wheel.
Nice to meet you, other Ryan.
Yeah,
We have
nice to meet you as well.
A running joke here in the Columbus Club because there's like 5 different bonsai Ryans. So I'm always just calling like, oh, other Ryan.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I had not actually met another Ryan in my life until I started Marai. And then I have
Really?
like 4 students named Ryan, and sounds like there's a theme in where are you at, Ohio?
Yeah, I'm in Ohio now, but
Okay.
you may have heard at some point I used to study with Dan Robinson. I know you've done some content out there with him. So
Yeah,
I
cool.
used to live in Seattle for several years.
Nice.
Mhm.
That's a world unto itself, Dan's world. I love it.
Yep.
Nothing but respect.
Yeah, I just remember first time going with Ryan or Houston to Dan's
yeah.
place that was our first episode we released, and Dan, as tomorrow is Wednesday, just came up. It's like, you see that tree over there? Pulled me right into his side and just like, look at that tree right there. I'm like, yeah. He's like, no, you're not seeing the tree. I'll tell you about it. I was like, oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, I learned a lot from that trip. A lot to unpack there. Still thinking about it these days.
He's like the ultimate ambassador of that space, obviously, because it's like such a reflection of him.
Yeah.
But
It's like his backyard for 80 years now. So
dude, unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
The bonsai community any of these like original pioneers and legends, the reason Miguel's driving a truck back is because we went out to Shanty Bithy
Oh, nice.
and picked up a few trees that they've had out there for a long time that they've been growing for a very long time. And I sat down with Jerome and his son and talked about Shanty Bithy and the beginning of Shanty Bithy and everything. But it's like anytime you talk to David Easterbrook or Bill Valvanis or Dan Robinson or in this case Jerome and the Shanty Bithy crew, it was like, man, they did not have the resources to learn bonsai, to know what the heck they're doing. It was like
Hmm.
so off the cuff. It was so rugged and inventive at that point in time, and there's a lot of failure in that, and there's a lot of learning curve in that and stuff. But like, hats off to the people that took on, bonsai at a point in time in the Western world where there just was not the knowledge being disseminated that we have now. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's like a level gain that can happen rapidly with the knowledge being present, but there is a tenacity to the spirit of those trees that were created by these pioneers who were just trying to find their way and chop a little path out of this uncharted wilderness of bonsai in North America that is pretty undeniable and makes those trees really special.
Mm. Yeah, I talk about that with Chase Rosade a lot. He's been a big
Mhm.
mentor to me, and
Another one.
been
Yeah.
doing stuff with him
Mhm.
now. I call him my daughter's bonsai grandpa.
Yeah, right.
He's like, I'm OG. I'm like, yeah, you're OG John. He's like, hell yeah. I'm like, he's turned 90 this year.
Yeah,
Wow.
Chase is
He's
incredible.
he still has his first tree from 1958, his
Yeah.
maple, and
Yeah.
he's slowing down. He's had some of his health stuff this year, but I really hope he does get to Kokofu this year. He wants to go, and I'm like, you gotta go,
Mm.
man. He's like, I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
like, do it, man. You got one life to live, and
Yeah.
you're 90
Yeah.
already.
Knowing Chase, he'll probably make that happen.
Yeah, I'm an instigator for him to do things because he's like, oh, I can like, no, 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 go. Like people want to see
Hmm.
you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, the bonsai war Chase Rosade is a legend. I mean,
He's just so humble, He doesn't take it for granted, and he doesn't take it as serious. He's just like, it's what it is.
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I really respect Chase a lot. I've had a lot of good times with Chase.
I, yeah, he's become a huge, almost like a prophetic person for me, but also how I instill teaching or other things like Ryan and I or Houston and I. Yeah, it's gonna be difficult. Um, we taught a lot in Columbus when I was there. I was there for 6 years. We just left. Yeah, did you hear what happened as far as why I ended up in New England
No.
area?
No.
So I was awarded the National Bonsai Imprinting Apprenticeship this year, but
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. It would have been awesome. Um, we were visiting family in Japan up at my in-laws' house, and my wife, Kumi, lost her job on the 14th, and I lost mine 10 days later over email. And I was supposed to
Wow.
start within a week, and we had just moved to DC, Maryland area, um, February 2nd, and flew out the 4th to Japan, go to Fukushima and stuff. And we were like, okay, you lost your job. That's fine. I got a buffer with mine. It's cool. And then over breakfast, that's a breakfast I'll never forget. And we had not even been in contract with the apartment on our lease for a month at the time. And so
Hmm.
they were separated from me for almost 5 months because she lost all health insurance, everything outright, and I just was bumping around. Chase called me a bonsai vagabond because
Right.
I was going up and down. It was
Mhm.
first a bonsai hobo, and somebody else was like, "No, you're a bonsai nomad," and Chase was like, "No, you're a vagabond."
Mhm.
I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay," and yeah, and then we're up here now in Williamstown, which is a nice place. It's 7,000 people, and the nearest bonsai related thing is hour each way. Chris Springer's in Springfield. You got Boston, but that's 3 hour drive one way, and making it work. Trying to help the
Yeah.
community out here.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, with the ethos of teaching, I guess that leads me to a question for you: is how do you find your teaching and your center to keep going with your teaching as you have now? Because you just got back on to Marai Live, right? In relation to
Mm.
another or a different approach to it, if I can say that.
Right. Right.
How does
Yeah.
that look for you?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question because I think I think what I've recognized over the course of time with bonsai, and this was like a seed planted in my head by Mark Nolanders when I was first going to the trophy, and he said, "Let me give you a little piece of advice. The 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 quantity of creativity that you have is finite, and if you tap that cauldron dry, it's very difficult to fill it up." And as a young, aspiring bonsai professional traveling globally and teaching and demonstrating, he said it's going to be real easy for that well to run dry. And so he said, just take it from somebody who's done it for a long time. You got to really protect that well that continues to drive creativity, inspiration, the motivation to pursue an art form that a lot of times is pretty thankless and other times is pretty painful, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I've found that same thing to be true with teaching. Now for bonsai, for me, being on the road and lending my creativity to the workshop, the demonstration, the private client work, whatever I'm doing is tremendously satisfying to see people's joy and have the personal interactions and the relationships that form. But ultimately, when you create trees, the payoff is the tree giving it back to you and the time spent after that, where you watch the tree respond and you develop that relationship. And I really found that constantly traveling, I did tap the well, like towards the end of 2012 into 2013, 3 years after my apprenticeship, like my bonsai well was running pretty dry. And that's
Mm.
really when I pulled back from travel and I really invested heavily in Marai and making this my place that I was going to focus my practice, around this garden and this facility and this incubator. But teaching was something that I've always felt from the beginning. It's like when you go to Japan and you obtain the skills of an apprenticeship, um, whoever your master is and whatever your specialty is, you have something that other people don't, that is currency, because there are a lot of challenging moral and ethical questions inside of bonsai, but sharing knowledge has never been morally or ethically challengeable in my mind. That's a positive thing, no matter
Mm.
how you try to cut the onion. Like you end up with people come out better as a result of sharing knowledge. And so I've always felt like the educational component of bonsai was something I could do without having to cross a lot of the moral and ethical hurdles of, say, collecting trees out of the wild and making a living selling them, or
Yeah.
trying to purchase things at a lower price and sell them at a higher price, and some of the common business models, which I'm not saying that they're in any way unethical. I'm just saying you end up working with a living organism that you may have to sell to keep the lights on and continue driving a
Yeah.
business forward. And I always felt compromised in that being the business model. So education was always the thing that I was like, as long as I can continue to give valuable knowledge and help people grow in their bonsai capacity, whatever their journey and for whatever reason, as long as I'm able to give them some value, I felt like that was a net positive. Over the course of time, though, the well runs dry on certain educational approaches for me. I've modified the shape and form of classes at Marai multiple times over the 14 years, because we really started in 2011. So the 14 years I've been teaching on site, I've modified the shape and form of the classes. Mainly, I've always wanted to give my most advanced students the best capacity to keep growing, because I think in the bonsai community, we do tend to cater to the beginner as the
Yeah.
widest footprint of
Mm.
potential people that want to learn, and then the most advanced people are sort of left out there to kind of fend for themselves and figure out more. And that's the most challenging place to be, because you go longer and farther between your big learning curves where you really elevate your bonsai practice the more advanced you get. And so adjusting the education was always thinking about my most advanced students in mind. And some of those changes led to educational models that really didn't work for people that weren't up to that level, which is a majority of bonsai practitioners. And so economically, it might have not been able to be feasible, or I wasn't able to have my advanced students as much as I wanted for that to work out to get them the growth that I really aspired to give them in the time that we had together. And then there's also like a commoditization of value and perception of value in the Western world that we have, where if you're not walking away with some new diamond or bar of gold of knowledge, a lot of times people have a hard time seeing the value in having invested in that time. But like I said, the more advanced you get, the longer you have to spend in that area of sort of plateauing in your knowledge and abilities before you obtain that next thing that elevates and you really see an accelerated growth of your skill set, your design, your technique, your horticulture, whatever it is. And so like working with the Western mentality and working with the structure of education has become something that's become very fluid for me here at Marai, because the ambition and goal of Marai has always been to provide the things that I did not have. That's like
Mm,
always been my motivation. Can I create a place that I always dreamed would exist when I was in college trying to find the knowledge, and I didn't have that resource? Um, and so thinking about, the evolution of my students and of bonsai in the Western world in general, constantly trying to level up while also bringing everybody that's interested in the same thing at differing levels and skills has been a major motivation. And that's where I get back to the live stream, because the live stream was never designed to be something that I continued to do. Like when
right.
we started the live stream, the ultimate outcome of the live stream was supposed to be more or less a comprehensive educational model online that was geographically unlimited. And I think that that morphed into the app, but an app that provides everything that Marai Live provided, which is long form bonsai process, while also telling you when to do what you need to do without you having to know that you need to go look for it. Those are very, very different things for technology to meet all of those demands in a single platform. And so after building the app and seeing how people use the app and getting feedback and not doing Marai Live and recognizing there's a disconnect from the community where Ryan Neal kind of stepped out of the public realm for a while. I haven't been going to exhibitions for reasons that I've been pretty vocal about in terms of judging, etc. I just kind of felt like, man, I really miss the community that was a part of that. And I'm not going to go back to doing the same thing. Like we developed different tools, like my knowledge has evolved. I've invested heavily in agronomy, regenerative agronomy, and
Mhm.
the horticulture and the science on a level that I never really thought I would have the tools to dig that deep. And design has continued to manifest in different ways, particularly with the projects in the wild. It's changed my perspective and helped me understand intention behind design and formalize a lot of the organization of how to impart my perception of these things to my students. So it felt like it was the right time to come back to Marai Live in a
Mm,
new way that was more quality than quantity, but to re-engage the community, to share some of the fruits of a lot of hard-earned knowledge over the course of the past several years of labor and intensive study. Um, and more than anything, just to get back in touch with the community that I really valued, which has been the ultimate byproduct and most unforeseen positive to everything that we've done at Marai, like this group of really passionate people around the world that are a part of what we do and feed into what we do and inspire what we do. Like I miss that. And so it was
yeah.
really special to relaunch it. Yeah.
I remember, those times when I was able to help you out and then I was able to sit in on some of the live streams. That's a whole system. Like that's a whole
Yeah.
machine that went on behind the scenes that not a lot of people knew about. I was very fortunate, and, thank you for that time. And I was just like, man, this is a whole nother level. But in relation to that too, it's like I understood why you stepped out. You're a father, you're a family man, you want to,
Totally.
how do you still find that balance to be trying to achieve a better balance, or how are you going about that now? I'm trying to figure that out myself. And other people ask me as a new father, like, how do you do it? I'm like, flip of a
Yeah, right.
coin,
Yeah.
flip of a coin day by day. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you can tell them all the things not to do. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of what it all comes down to. Yeah, I mean, my son's 11 now,
Yeah.
and over
Wow,
the course
already
of yeah, he's 11,
11.
but over the course of the past 5 years, I've become a stepfather to three other boys. So
Hmm.
there's four boys in my family,
Congrats.
11, 12, 16, and 18, soon going on 19, 17, and 13. Taft will turn 12 in 9 days. So, like,
Wow.
time has gone on, like the boys have grown up a lot. And, I think like it's really hard to merge the passion and lifestyle of bonsai with the Western mentality because in Japan, bonsai is a lifestyle.
Mm.
And the kids grow up around bonsai and the family, facilitates the bonsai practice and endeavor. It's a family-wide endeavor being a bonsai professional in Japan. And in the United States, it's like we live a life where I think we're constantly talking about balance and trying to strike this balance as
Yeah.
if work and family are different, and that's always been really difficult because I more or less lead a professional, like a Japanese professional's lifestyle at Marai. Like I'm here all the time. I'm caring for the trees 365,
Mm-hmm.
24/7, which is very familiar to me from my apprenticeship and the way that I saw bonsai practiced at the highest level. But then there is this expectation to extricate yourself from this lifestyle and then have a personal life that's sort of separate from it, and that's not really possible. But it is the Western expectation of this notion of balance, which I would really love to find somebody who's actually found it, because I think it's one of these sort of ethereal things like happiness. It's like this phrase that we're all supposed to aspire to, that like somebody found in a book,
Yeah.
um, and it's not, I just don't find it to be real.
Yeah.
Or even in the aspiration of it, I think balance forces you to move towards mediocrity, honestly.
Mm.
So, trying to incorporate and show the boys that work really is a positive thing. It doesn't need to be demonized, even though there's all kinds of cartoons and after school shows that show these families going through these traumatic things of the dad not being around and working too much. And it does really plant a lot of seeds in kids' minds of like, oh yeah, I'm getting shorted here. But it's like, well, no, if you're a part of it
Mm-hmm.
and you get to appreciate that there is a life where you get to do something that you love and it doesn't feel like work, when that's the life that you chose for yourself and intentionally tried to live, there's a lot of beauty in getting to share that and model that for your kids. And so that's kind of been how I've tried to modify my perspective of it, also being indoctrinated with the general Western mentality of a quest for happiness and balance, and
Yeah.
recognizing that it's not attainable for me in what
Mm-hmm.
I aspire to do with my life and limited time on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So, work in progress for sure, but the boys are very much a part of this place and operation. And, Taft's got his trees, but beyond that, Taft is just here. He knows the team, he knows the students.
Right.
um, they come to dinners with us when I'm teaching. We live out here. They are a part of helping me move things and do work on the facility, and that's been like the very best way that I've found to like blend this notion of family and business or profession or
Mm.
occupation,
So,
as I see it.
so it's better integration over time then.
Kind
Trying
of like
to.
a
Yeah.
family business at this point then.
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been times where it's been a little bit more of a family business than it is now, because
Mm.
our lives are sort of bridged between a reality where there's a lot better schools in Portland
Yeah.
than there are out
Yeah.
here in Columbia
Yeah.
County, and there's a lot
Yeah.
more
Mm.
opportunity for kids to be involved in sports and social activities and stuff like that. So I still am a little bit on the outside of town, as Dan would
Yeah.
say.
The
Mm.
dirty
Um,
30.
yeah, totally. The dirty 30, pass it every day and still
Yeah.
wonder what it looks like in there. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, it's a challenge, but since rebuilding the house and the reconstruction of the facility and stuff, we are definitely finding a new lifestyle, trying to be out here
Nice.
more, and like the boys and my wife Irene integrating into Marai, and this being, another home that we have and stuff. And that's been a whole nother journey unto
Mhm.
itself, because there was there's just like a lot of grime and grit in what transpired here and how you move past that and how you start to
Yeah.
forge new positive connotation in a place that's taken on a lot of trauma, which Marai definitely took on some pretty heavy stuff. But I think it's been really also pretty cathartic to have to confront that stuff and try and find a new way, find a
Yeah.
new way, find a new perspective.
Within that perspective, like you're talking about with the loss, is that similar, if not the same for you from the loss you felt like when you talk about with Kimura before, where you went back and said, hey, and he just treated you like a known, like you weren't anybody's business except to work?
Yeah, that's really interesting you asked me that. Nobody's ever really asked me that and drawn that similarity, but the moment that you said, is it similar to how that transpired? Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
actually it is. It's like coming to peace with something that is out of your control, and the only thing that you can do is decide how you respond to it.
mm,
I think I think that the rejection that I felt from my apprenticeship probably manifested itself in a bubbling cauldron of fire inside me to
mhm,
try and do something exceptional and actualize what I wanted to be, which was the best bonsai artist I had the capacity to be, in this version of myself. And over the course of time, like that fire, I learned a lot. I've grown. I've, experienced life. I've gone through some things, um, and I don't feel that same like anger
mm,
or that same motivation inspired by the defiance that I felt of needing to prove
yeah,
something to the only person that matters is really proving it to yourself. But
mm,
I felt like I needed to prove something to the world in a lot of ways, coming with the reputation of the best bonsai master that's ever existed in my mind. And I think I think a lot of people share that. Mr. Kimura is a true genius, and I had his name tattooed on my back leaving, and there were high expectations, and I didn't want to disappoint for his
mm,
lineage, for the respect I had for him, for the respect I had for myself, my own self expectation. But, um, losing something that you have worked hard for and earned or built with your bare hands and sacrificed for, which is, the level that I achieved in my apprenticeship, and having feeling like that was sort of immediately remove that sense of place and belonging in a foreign culture that I worked hard to not be a foreign entity in over the time, is very similar to building this space in a spot where, like one of the great human needs, basic human needs, is shelter, and that
mm,
shelter means a lot. It's your point of safety, and that sense of safety and security that comes with that being really violated and broken down and dismantled. What was really tough, both of them have taken me a long time to recover from. I doubt I'll ever fully recover from either one
yeah,
of them, because those things definitely leave their mark, and there's like a really deeply embedded memory of the experience of that. But you have to continue moving forward, or else
yeah,
that act owns you. And I don't want to be owned by anything, like
mm,
I think when you think about happiness or balance or freedom, these like big grand statements, it's like being untethered to this sense that other people have control over you, and like, or other things have control over you, and being sort of the master of your own destiny. I think that's what I've learned. I aspire to achieve sort of in
mm,
this in this lifetime that I have, is just really trying to sever not the tethers of love and friendship and relationship, nothing like that, but um, severing feelings that are a byproduct of not having control of a situation and being controlled by your desire to control those things. And I had no control over how Mr. Kimura viewed me as an apprentice pre and post,
yeah.
and I really had no control over what happened here. I just was left to
Pick up the
respond to
pieces.
it. Yeah, exactly. And
Mm.
try to move forward without it having control,
Yeah.
Do you think that practicing bonsai and having that continuity of working on the trees themselves, like the business aside, do you think that that has helped you embrace the fact that you don't have control over everything and like heal from what you need to heal over?
Yeah, I was just having this conversation in the workshop with my apprentice and a student who's here to study, but I think that I have I think that I have I think that you are going to commit the same mistakes in life over and over until you learn the lesson. Like life's not going to stop cycling that back through your pipeline of experiences, and it's kind of on us to decide if we're going to learn that lesson or if we're going to keep beating our head against a wall and suffering what I think are cumulatively greater and greater painful marks from not learning the lesson.
Mhm.
And I think control is one of these things that we all kind of seek in our life. Like we want to know that we can determine our own situation and circumstances. And in bonsai, one of the most painful things that I've learned is that I really have no control. And
Mm.
that's really frustrating and upsetting to me because you go through a lot to make these
To
living
try.
organisms
Yeah.
look beautiful. And when I say make, I think even that's a fallacy because you got to work with the tree, right? But like you're
Hmm.
giving an impression and then the tree responds. And as you converse more and more, the tree gets closer to your vision. And if you can work with it, it will do what you want it to do if you're working in respect to the tree. But it never works out exactly as you want. And letting go of the rope on that is really a tough balance because it's like you still have a duty and responsibility. The tree depends on you for survival. So there's no just like walking away and being like, fuck it, you figure it out yourself. Then
Yeah.
that's not the obligation that you took on when you took on ownership of that tree. But
Yeah.
it also is like, man, I tried so hard and it still didn't worked out differently, worked out in
Hmm.
ways, but those have also been the biggest growth points, right? Like that's when you really, really learn, when
Yeah.
you're like, oh, wow, I did
Yeah.
not know that, and that's been, I would say the past 3 years being separate from the live stream and more public in the sharing of my knowledge, just learning so much about the internal structure of the tree, the behavior, the balance, the ability to manipulate things by providing more of or less than, and seeing how all of those things dovetail. The complexity of it is overwhelming. The desire to understand it all completely consumed me to the fault, of the process and of everything else. And I've always been somebody who has pushed past the walls to know
Mm.
where the boundaries exist. And I really, even in the science and horticulture, pushed past the limits and found out where that boundary exists. And it helps me reframe and find some of the fundamental things you forget in the quest for the outer limits. Um, but definitely, like the trees have been the guiding force. They're the motivation and they're also the greatest learning tool that I have. And honestly, they're kind of the best friend that I've got through this
Mm.
whole experience because they're the reason that we do it, and what they give back to you is such a silent instruction on life if you can listen and metaphorically sort of decipher what they're trying to say, which is like finding
Hmm.
meaning in something that doesn't maybe have that same intention to give you what you're giving it, but you get it whether you are looking for it or not. It's just a matter of if you're ready to receive it. And I think I've learned over the course of time how to better receive what the trees have to offer, and accept that that is something special that doesn't always come with the most pristine design or most refined shape or most excellent execution. It comes in all of the spaces between the hard lines that we tend to define as
Yeah.
the practice of bonsai in the Western world.
Authenticity.
Yeah, yeah, and the value in the unspoken,
Yeah.
the value in the lesser valued space between the words.
So it's almost sounding like, I can empathize with this idea. I'll say, not to put words in your mouth, but this loss of identity to find yourself again in relation to going through these trials and tribulations to only find out that you didn't think you were that person who could do the thing you're doing now, or never expected to be the person who you are now. Because we're always trying to find our own personalities in anything we do, whether it be trees or raising a kid, right? It's like, because they're a reflection of us. What is one thing that you think people get wrong about you consistently?
Oh, that's really, yeah. Hmm.
Going
I,
deep tonight.
yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, I
I
actually,
I haven't
Lonnie came
talked to you in
down.
a while.
Yeah, no, well, and you're a deep dude, and you and I go here when we talk, but like Lonnie came down and we were having this super esoteric discussion in the workshop, and she's like, "All right, you ready to podcast?" And I was like,
Mm.
"Yeah, I might be too deep, but we're here, and I love it,
Can
and
bring you back.
it's kind of where where I was at when we started, but
Good.
I have to be really honest. I see some things that people say about me. I hear some things that people say about me. I've never obviously it impacts me. So it's not to
Mm.
say I don't care, like right?
Yeah,
Like
you're
that's
only
an easy one.
human,
I don't
right?
care what
Yeah,
people say.
yeah,
Yeah, everybody cares.
Mm.
To
yeah,
some degree it
yeah,
hurts.
yeah,
Or it's nice, or it's
yeah,
flattering or
yeah.
it's validating, all of those things. Um, but I've never put a lot of weight into it
Mm.
because I had a very like clear path and motivation from the beginning, and although I've gone through periods of lacking a little bit of purpose or intention or wondering what the heck I'm doing, I have never fully lost sight of what I'm all about and what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I'm a bigger critic of myself than anybody else will be. I'm more judgmental of my work, my actions, the things I say,
Right.
how I come off, trying to always like tease out, is my motivation pure? Is my intention right? And also, did I handle that in a way that when I look back, whether it's on the deathbed or just in a point in time in life where I'm a little bit wiser, that I'm gonna kind of go, oh,
Mm.
that like cringy
Yeah.
feeling of like, wow, I really fucked up there. And there's a lot of things I look back at my apprenticeship or how I handled post apprenticeship where I look back and I feel like, yeah, that wasn't that wasn't the best way to handle that, or that's something that I'm gonna carry with me as like, I don't feel good about that and I don't want to repeat
Yeah.
that mistake.
Well, yeah, your
Um,
edges were too sharp then,
they
You've
were
rounded
very
out a bit,
sharp. Yeah, they were very sharp. And I think they cut a lot of people. And I didn't intend to have any outward harm. I just I didn't know how to sheathe the blade at
Mhm.
that point in time. And I
Mhm.
still have those moments. I think like anybody who's trying to do something that has not been done or is trying to do it
Yeah.
differently. I mean, Dan Robinson's a perfect example. Like
Yeah.
he can be prickly at times and it can
Mm.
rub people the wrong ways and it can hurt and it can do
Mhm.
damage. And also like he's doing something that's bucking the trend and nobody else has done. And you have to have that sharpness of your blade to do it in a way that people will respect. Otherwise, you're just doing something less than what everybody else is doing. And I and
Yeah.
and I think I saw that. I saw that with Mr. Kimura and how he bucked the trend and the edge that it took for him to do that and the edge that it took for him to maintain that level of greatness for the entirety of his career, which a narrative arc of an artist does not maintain that level for that long unless you've got some pretty prickly points and you can maintain that durability of taking those hits. But I would say, um, if I just had to, if I had to imagine how people perceived me,
Hmm.
I would assume that some people probably perceive me as having a high level of arrogance. I was giving a critique in Chicago in 2012, and at that time it was put on YouTube, and the YouTube comments were super vicious, and I felt like it was one of the better critiques I had given with really positive, constructive feedback. But one of the things that stuck in my mind is here's another one of these Japanese trained Western apprentices that thinks they're a bonsai god.
Hmm.
And it's like a fine line being an educator that is trying to share organized information as I come to make sense of it. And to give that to somebody in a way where they can feel confident in the information they're given to be able to use it and apply it. And I have tried, I've made missteps, like whether it's the compost extract or promoting modalities in bonsai that weren't proven to work and then later finding out they don't work. And, that can build mistrust or things like that. Like I've made missteps in that, but I really do try to break the knowledge and information that I put out there, and really beat it down and see if it holds up before I put it out there, because I want people to feel confident that they can listen to what I'm saying and feel like it's going to work for their trees given all criteria, et cetera. And that's a really complex thing. But like I want to give good knowledge that gives people success, or else bonsai doesn't progress.
Right.
Um, And so like inside of that, if arrogance or some notion, that I know everything or know better than other people comes across, I can definitely see that, but it is definitely not the reality of how I feel or think about myself and the information I'm giving. Because I'm constantly trying to break it down and I'm constantly criticizing and scrutinizing my own work and what I'm doing. And this place was really the place that I needed to create to work out these ideas and
Mm,
try and test all of the knowledge and see if it in fact worked. And continuing to travel and stay aware of changing trends and climate and horticulture and all those things is how I try to stay on top of being able to give good, solid, valuable information and adapt it so that it's malleable and people can retrofit it to where they're at in their practice and what they're trying to accomplish. But that off the top of my mind, I think arrogance when you are perceived as an authoritative figure or an educator giving knowledge can often be misplaced and certainly for Marai, it would definitely not be a good representation
mm,
of who I am, how I think about what I do, and definitely how I try to convey the knowledge that I'm trying to share.
mm. It's in that relationship where I know a lot of musicians that give their full life devoted to music and they have the same kind of expression of this energy that just is exuding from them, where they're like, oh, they're on a different level. And if people aren't on that level, from my experience, they're not in the same kind of contingency of
Mhm.
the application to get there or understand what it takes to get there. Because from my experience as a Westerner being in relationship with a non-Western person, it's very much that ethos where there is that mindset of Westerners where it's like, I'm bigger than I think I am sometimes, but I'm also not as big as I want to be.
Mhm.
And I think people get thrown off by that because we're not supposed to do that sometimes. But then again, if you look at all the people that made history for what it is, good, bad, or otherwise, it was the same composition of that framework, right? You keep
Mhm.
pushing through the grit, you cut your teeth, and then you file them down till they're sharp and pointy. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
being a
Absolutely.
father does that too, right? You're growing a kid. It's like I'm a full-time dad now. When I left Ohio, my intention was to bring the trees later this year. They're going to be at a friend's place in his backyard in Maryland. Could have had them. I sold all my trees because I couldn't.
Not
You know.
quite all of them,
Well,
but
yeah,
yeah.
I still have a few left in the pocket, but they're not with me. And I
Mm.
talked to David Cutchins about this. Him, Dave, obviously,
Obviously. Yeah.
a good brother in Bonsai,
One of
family
my
member, and all
dudes.
that.
Yeah, one of my
Yeah,
dudes.
I yeah, yeah. I told him, I got a loss, but I learned more from that loss and the identity of who I thought I was in relation to it wasn't who I was supposed to be anymore because my trees are now on to new life that will then exemplify what they're meant to be in relationships of new people that I could help guide as well. Because I know the
Yeah.
people that bought them. And it sounds like it's similar for you in relationships of like there are people that come and go through each part of your life, but friendships aren't forever and trees aren't forever to be with you. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I can understand what you're saying to that because I've been going through the whirlwind of this identity
Mm.
and you don't know to where you're going until you get somewhere where you've never been.
Mm.
And that's this new year. I hope we find all that.
Yeah, I think I start I think I start every spring, like optimistic and like this is going to be the best year ever. And
Yeah.
what I've learned over like 15 years is
Don't say it.
I'm gonna take my licks
Yeah.
every year and they're gonna look different. And
Yeah.
that was one thing about watching Mr. Kimura pursue bonsai. I remember when I was by myself as his only apprentice
Mm.
for 9 months. I was the only one there, and it was more it was more man-to-man direct communication at that time, obviously, because it was just me and him. There was nobody else to like metaphorically buffer what was being
Yeah.
said directly in an indirect way. And I was seeking some level of recognition that like the garden was healthy and looking good. And I said,
Yeah.
the garden looks really good right now. And he said, yeah, it's spring. Just wait. And I was like, no, no, no. If I'm responsible for this, it's gonna look good the whole year. And he knew, and everybody in bonsai should know, eventually. And it's also a product of scale. Like the more trees you have, the more
Mm.
problems you're gonna have, the
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
setbacks you're gonna have. That's a
Yeah.
that's a part of a product of scale. But
Yeah.
like I always think about that because every spring I'm like, "All right, can this be the year that like nothing catastrophic happens and I just get to live this kumbaya, romantic vision of bonsai where all the trees are healthy and we make lots of cool trees and everybody gets along and things are just, euphoric and I've yet to accomplish that.
Mm,
So I'm starting to learn 15 years in. That's not really a realistic vision to
mm,
set my sights on or build up my hopes for. Um, and in that, there's like a real danger of like, when's the shoe going to drop? Where
yeah.
you lack the ability to enjoy it because you're just waiting for the next
Hmm.
catastrophic thing to happen. And, Marai is outside of city limits. It's not in the buffer of a built environment. It's in the middle of a forest. And there's a lot of unpredictable things that happen in the middle of a forest, whether it's a tree falling or, a blizzard or high
Heat
winds
dome.
or
Yeah,
heat dome,
the heat wave in
Yeah.
2021. I mean,
Absolutely. You
Mm.
name
I
it,
was
it
there for that one.
happens here. Yeah, I've really realized Marai is I thought I was taking the trees from a rugged environment and bringing them into a friendly environment where they can just show,
It's like,
in
here I am,
their
guys.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
like,
totally. Like now I'm all good, but like I have the scars, but
check me
really
out.
things are
Yeah,
great. And it's like, no, Marai as a facility is is
yeah.
is a rugged place for people and trees to exist. And that's been going back to the control thing, that's been a little hard to relinquish control that I haven't created utopia
Hmm.
because that's what I thought I was creating. And really inside of Mr. Kimura's garden in the built environment, there was a lot of control. And in the Japanese model of bonsai, there's a lot of control.
Hmm.
And in their practice, there's a lot of control. And I just have not found that to be the case where I'm at with what I'm doing and what I'm seeking to learn. Yeah, so it's that's been a little bit brutal to realize over time, but I think I'm getting better at accepting it every year because every year, unless I accept it, I'm gonna be, sort of
Yeah,
brutally bludgeoned by that
yeah.
reality.
Yeah, I think there's also a cultural identity with that with Japan because it's such a long cultured craft and art form that's been there. They have that methodology. And I can only speak from what I've seen, and that's been more than probably some people around the world because of my access to the culture, but also not having ever taken an official apprenticeship over there in that only space where you live and you don't see anything outside of that niche area, right? We
Mhm.
talked about this before,
Sure.
a while back. And it's that idea where there is that control method because that's how the method of control is for the society as a whole. The
Mhm.
saying goes, if there's a nail sticking out of a board, you hammer it down. Groupthink is a thing that works for them. It's also what's made them last for millennia, right?
Totally.
And as Westerners, the thing that I get into a lot is where people find that I'm married to a Japanese person, so they assume something about me where it's like this. I'm like, no, I have to. We talked about this back, I think, at the first expo in California, like balancing both sides because I owe it to my other side of my family, but also to myself. And I think there's a weird contingency in the US right now, especially with this Japan versus not Japan versus whatever you want to call it. I just want us to be happy making trees. And I've been traveling
Hmm.
a lot on the East Coast and the Midwest and then, West Coast too. And I've seen a lot of things. I wouldn't say I've traveled as much as you or anyone else, but how can we get past that? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I know it's been a while since you traveled, but there are things that you've seen come and go, especially with online teaching and now your own methodologies. I mean, not to say you
Yeah,
have all the
I mean, don't get me
knowledge, but
wrong. I
it's
still I still travel and teach quite a bit. I mean,
oh yeah,
so
yeah, but
I try
just
I
yeah,
try to stay aware. Yeah, for me, I feel like having to draw a hard line of like I'm a loyalist to this approach, this
yeah.
is what I like, this is what I do is really ridiculous.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
really ridiculous
yeah.
be
I was gonna
because
say,
I've
yeah.
go ahead.
uh, do you feel that people still pigeonhole you because you studied with Kimura or did an apprenticeship, where you should be a certain way, then you're not?
No, I don't think so anymore because I've been such
Oh,
a staunch advocate for representing nature in miniature and the Marai and the Wild projects. I think I put my money where my mouth was and I went
mm,
out there and I did it. And I do it. I do that. That's the most important thing that I do for me, for what I'm trying to achieve. But if you come to Marai, I don't know what people expect when they come here, but a large majority of the trees are still styled in a traditional manner.
Right.
Um, it's rare that in a miniature form you get the elements present to do justice to the material of its highest aesthetic potential, creating a natural form. Like
Mm.
everything's got to be right to show that condition in the environment in a miniaturized form in that condensed space and proportion. And so the traditional model, like the proportions and the scale, and there's a physiological response to seeing that in the human brain and what it generates, and um, beyond that, just the beautiful discipline of it, and the the form and the pattern of it. If you're in karate or taekwondo, and it's your fundamental forms. If you're in yoga, it's your traditional poses. If whatever you're doing, it's like that is the basis for the practice that we
Mm.
have all come to know and love. I don't I think, I spoke in that period of my life where I was trying to carve out a different identity and figure out what does it mean to do bonsai in America in this context with this material and this inspiration,
Mm.
represent it, represent culture, represent environment, represent the individual when we're all speaking on a different artist statement. I think I spoke pretty derogatorily about the traditional model, and that is something that I would now I feel like the way I'm able to speak about it is like we should be able to do that and this, and
Yeah.
ultimately the tree should be the one that decides. But the barrier to entry to making trees look natural is you've got to spend a lot of time in the environment.
Mm.
Like you've got to get
Mhm.
out into the wild, which is I do believe where we're meant to be.
Mm.
Um, you got to get out there and you've got to experience it and feel it and know it and understand it, and you've got to be able to make sense of it and abstract it, and you've got to have the technique and the horticulture to actualize it and express it and represent it and be able to evolve it. And that's a big, let's just be really honest, that's a big skill set that nobody has ever really broken down. Okay, we do this to a Japanese black pine to make it look like a traditional pine, but can you handle Japanese black pine that same way and show more of an umbrella canopy that would grow on the coast of the islands outside of,
Right.
southeastern, Honshu? And
Yeah.
the reality is, no, you have to make modifications to that system horticulturally, technically, artistically, to be able to represent that natural form. And I've found that across the board, whether it's reiterations with redwoods or whether it's a wind-informed shape on a limber pine. And it's like it has to be, there's tweaks to the traditional model. And I don't think that a lot of people are going to have the number of trees and time spent
Yeah.
trying to massage that to be able to manifest the best of it. And that's where, as an educator, I feel like my job is to share those insights that I've kind of found. If people find my work to be visually beautiful, then like, here's how I did it. Here's how I get here. Here's how I make the changes and the adjustments. Um, but respecting that both are equally valid, and we don't need to stake draw a line in the sand that I do this or this, I like
Yeah.
this or this, because it's all, yeah, you're right. Let's get back to making trees. Like, let's enjoy the beauty in whatever context and form it's being represented, because they're all valid if done well.
Yeah.
That was the
Mhm.
fundamental thing. Like, if you do it well, it's valid. If people
Yeah.
can look at it and say, wow, that's beautiful. I'm transported to that landscape, or wow, that's beautiful. That looks
Mm.
like a bonsai. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, both of those are awesome. Like, let's
Yeah.
be really clear.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that's where I wish the conversation would go.
That's how every
Um,
time I try to steer it, I was able to teach Jim Doyle's this year during spring. I worked with him for a bit at his nursery. He hired me on with the whole job loss and stuff. I worked with him and Chase in the
mhm,
Woodstock class that he has. And I learned so much just from them teaching, but I also brought a different perspective because I'm not that I'm younger, but I just have a different outlet and a different access to, like people like yourself or Michael, all these people that have different ethos and aesthetics and
yeah.
manipulation techniques or what have you. And we all came centered at the end of the session, the final day of the three-day class. And we were both like, wow, we all learned something new from everybody, including the students.
Hmm.
And
Oh yeah.
it wasn't about cultural identity of a tree, certain shapes or things. It wasn't about this or that. It was just we were there. There was no bureaucracy of East versus West or whatever else. It's not the 1990s hip hop battle. It's
Totally.
it's just this
It's
thing, and
not
I
Tupac and Biggie. Yeah,
no,
it's
yeah,
not. That's not what we're doing here.
no, and I think it's getting there, but again, like yourself, you've been striving to say that, and I feel like, you know, you hear talks, but also you hear people not being able to get past what people have said before, and they don't see you as who you are now.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Do you feel like that's kind of something that's also contributed to certain people saying something about you?
Yeah, yeah, possibly. I mean, I think it's harder and harder to know people authentically in the modern era.
Yeah,
And so I think a lot of people's hypotheses about other individuals is shrouded in what's seen on social channels and in these, sound bites and media distributions. I definitely try to be my authentic self in what we distribute through Marai because I really find it disenchanting to see this this makeup laden lipo appearance on
yeah,
social and feel like you know somebody, and it's like people who want to play that game and present their non-authentic self as being this, idyllic, beautiful, aspirational end goal. It's not, it's not real, and I don't
right,
value or find that authenticity to be awesome. So my obligation, if that's how I feel, is to try and be as authentic as I possibly can. And I feel like I've done my best, but I definitely pulled back uh from the public eye
yeah,
and being out there as much, putting myself out there as much. Like I needed that, like you said, to be a good dad, to be a good husband, to build a family, to rebuild this place. But I also
right,
needed it just for myself, because I had a lot of
yeah,
shit to figure out after going through another pretty challenging sort of life moment there, and like and then trying to figure out also with all of these changing tides, like where is Marai headed? Where am I headed? Like what is the reason? What is the motivation? What is the purpose? Like if there's no purpose, this was never a vanity art form for me. It
mm,
was always an expression and a vehicle of expression. And it's like, what am I trying to say? And like that's really where I do like find a lot more value in the silence and letting people interpret me for what they will. But like if I'm representing the natural landscapes that are forming me for who I am and what I'm becoming, I don't really need to talk about it as much. I've
mm,
realized, like I'm not standing on a soapbox telling people they need to make trees look more natural. If I were going to stand on a soapbox, I would say, please get out into these places, please value these
mm,
places, please conserve these places because
yeah,
they're
yeah,
an identity that we don't get back and they're rapidly disappearing and rapidly being taken advantage of. But that would be the only soapbox that I would stand on at this point in time. I mean, like I look at Mario Comstaw's work, I look at Sergio Kwan's work, I look at Peter T's work, I'm aware of everybody's work, and all of them are doing amazing things in different ways that
mm,
like, you take little tidbits from everything and it's like, ooh, how does Peter get that kind of ramification on the interior
right,
branches of his
right,
trees? And how does Mario get away with removing that many needles and continuing to drive the horticulture forward? And how does he achieve, that softness on this species at this time, or that ramification on that tree in that contain? Like I'm always thinking about that stuff, but I think like aesthetically and like what I'm trying to express, I'm really thinking about like what my intention is with every tree that I sit down to and how to make it the best with the vision that I have and all of the things that I bring to that scope of work at that point in time. And I think the really difficult thing is detaching the weight that we carry on a daily basis from all of the things around us, all the noise when you sit down with a bonsai tree, because the tree feels that wire when you're tense or when you're
mm,
upset or when you're not present, and the tree
mm-hmm,
feels that prune that was misplaced because you were in the wrong headspace. And so it's like, how does bonsai become something where you detach yourself from those things and you bring your best self to the tree regardless of external circumstances? I really feel like that's what defines a professional.
mm, mm,
And it's not that easy. It's not that easy on a daily basis dealing with life in the United States. I mean, we got it really good, but like it's gotten more complicated. There's a lot of
yeah,
of red tape and paperwork to living here compared to what my life was like in Japan or what I see life being like in other places. And it's not to say the grass is only green, always greener. It's to say there's a complexity to life here that has grown more complex, with
Mm-hmm.
technology, with social media, with infrastructure, and the necessity to maintain what the United States has become
Yeah.
as a citizen here. It takes a little more work, and so
Mm.
that creates a lot of noise. To
Yeah.
create bonsai in the United States is to be able to cut through some of that noise and find your best self when you sit down with that tree, which is a real skill set, and it's also a real discipline.
Mhm. So you mentioned that you often in your garden they are traditional forms and naturally inspired forms. Have you experimented with other kind of genres of bonsais like Robinson-esque or clip and grow or Lenzian or cosmic even? Like in terms of the tree calling for it to be traditional or naturally inspired, does it ever pull you in a unique direction that you haven't really aren't as well known for that other artists are more well known for?
Yeah, no, I can only make what I am, right? I can
Mm-hmm.
only make what's natural within me to bring to the table. Does that mean that I'm not informed by the wild shapes of a Landon and the complete lack of tether to, I mean, Dan really sort of lets go of the rope completely and says, all right, this tree's going to do what it's going to do. The branches that are going
Yeah.
to live are live. The branches
Yeah.
that are going to die are going to die. And
Mm.
that's all part of it. And I look at that and I'm just like, damn, that's awesome. Like it's undeniable. If you spend 4 days at a land and gardens and you go look at traditional bonsai, they're going to look boring. And that's not to say traditional bonsai is boring. It's to say when you acclimate to Dan Robinson's garden, it is undeniably filled with visual energy and a uniqueness of form that you don't see anywhere else. And you could say the same thing about standing in front of Lauren's compositions at the trophy, and you've got 200 trees that are styled in varying cultural forms and cultural representations of the bonsai model, and then you've just got this cosmic bonsai with this very innovative avant-garde and very defiant gesture. It's got the biggest crowd around it, and you stand in front of it, and you're just like, it's undeniably of a high horticultural level, high technical level, high artistic level, and it looks nothing like anything else.
Mm.
But I can't make that, and I don't aspire to make that, and I don't aspire to make Dan's work or Nick's work or Walter Paul's work or anybody else's work. I can only make what I can make, and what I have tried to do to make that authentic to myself is load my database of images that I reference with the things that I find to be true to me, which ultimately has become the oldest and wildest trees in the most outlandish natural environments. And so that's really what I fill my file base in my mind with, that I reference the most when I'm creating a tree.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I feel like this is probably an area where, there may be differences within the community, but a lot of hobbyists, say here in Columbus, we'll have different visiting artists come through. And so we may have trees influenced by different artists. And I feel like a lot of people are at the hobbyist level are open to saying, okay, I'm going to try to make this one cosmic, or I'm going to try to make this one gnarly, or kind of have more variation like that. But I see what you're saying about focusing on your style, like what you are more adapted to, rather than trying to copy other artists.
Yeah, and that's not to say, listen, do I admire the conical apex of Nick Lenz's larches? Yeah, I think
Mm.
it's super true to form. Do I look at David Crust's work and say he captured the ultra elongated tall form in the narrowness of his branches with a high level of ramification? For sure. I think that there's certain aspects of what people are able to pull off where I'm like, that is authentic to that species. They did
Mm.
it. They cracked the code. I want to know what that looks like, and I want to know how I can pull that into my practice to give this tree a much more authentic gesture and representation of the species or the environment or that element. I mean, David DeGroote's wind and form design was
Mm.
way ahead of its time in his initial design book, in his Jabota Kaba that's formed in that, is a nightmare to maintain, but like undeniably epic and
Mm.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
like trying to get a tamarisk to be a weeping form, as if you might as well just slam your head against two cinder blocks, but like it's fucking awesome when you pull it off. So it's like
Yeah.
all of those things that, I do see, experiment, want to know, understand, learn, but ultimately, like like I said, like my value system growing up in Colorado in the mountains, finding the wild and remote landscapes of North America and on a global level, because I've been to a lot of ancient trees on different continents, that's where my best experiences and my best self exists, as I see myself. It's where I feel the most grounded. It's where I feel the happiest. It's where I feel that I carry the least amount of weight and burden, and I'm able to sort of be free of that stuff. And reflecting that sensation and that experience, I think gets back to the core of why penjing started in China. You're talking
Mm,
about an art form that was ultimately pursued by sophisticated, educated, and potentially spiritually driven individuals that went and had profound experiences and didn't have a cell phone to take a snapshot that they came home to look at periodically. And so what did they do? They made a tree that represented that landscape and was able to remind them of that space. Like I feel like what I'm trying to do is I didn't have that goal in mind, but that's what happened. And then I was like, oh shit, this is where this whole thing started. Now I kind of get it, or at least I feel like I get it to some degree why this began and what the whole purpose of it was. And so from that perspective, Penjing's become a bigger influence, but I honestly don't look at a lot of Penjing, and I honestly don't look at like a tremendous amount of bonsai. I look a lot more for ancient trees, just
mm.
in like my general like free time and stuff. I'm always trying to find where's the next ancient grove I want to go to? Are there images of it? If there are not, I'm going to go take them myself. If there are, I'm going to look at them and I'm going to imagine what it's like to be there, and I'm going to get there to see it for myself.
Mm. Have you heard of that opt outside challenge that REI does?
No.
Oh, well, they every year around Black Friday, they kind of challenge all their, I don't know, customers to spend Black Friday outside in nature instead of shopping. So we were actually planning something similar where we were going to publish some little blurb saying, okay, we want all of our listeners to go outside in nature between now and Christmas, whenever they have time, and then report back what they observed, like try to observe something in the natural environment. And this idea came about also because I'm very drawn to the natural environment, obvious inspiration of Dan Robinson. So I've been kind of experimenting with ideas to make this podcast medium a little more two-way rather than just one-way communication. So I'm interested to see what people will observe. But I also had a question for you that you say that you're very drawn to these natural forms and like that's your main inspiration. And obviously, a lot of respect goes into that, respect for nature, for the trees. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Like, how do you think about that and combining them with these modern containers like Jonathan Cross or like with someone like Ben Keating is doing? Because I've been talking to him more and I have a couple of his pots, and now I'm like, I have not reconciled for myself what the heck do I put in a Ben Keating pot, but he's still experimenting. So I'm still kind of watching and waiting and thinking about that.
Yeah. Well, what I would say about Jonathan Cross is I don't think there's a more organic container that exists
Mm,
that is man-made, right? Like you could go find a piece of driftwood or a rock, a natural stone, and now you have nature on nature, right? In terms of the aesthetic. But Jonathan is using incredibly organic methodologies. He's creating, and I think this is really necessary to understand, he's creating in the environment. Like he's out in the desert making his work. He's firing with natural materials that leave their print on the work. When I put the John Naka tree into the Jonathan Cross, I felt like there was nothing more appropriate that I could have done. And that was so controversial, like this modern container. I actually look at Jonathan Cross's work and think that it's about as organic
mm,
as man-made work gets. So from that perspective, I don't think there's another ceramicist that's doing more important work in the bonsai sphere than Jonathan Cross right now. And that's why our trees continue to find their way into the ones that stick around here, because there's become a bigger and bigger demand as people appreciate that aesthetic and start to understand it. Like the the continuity of it is undeniable as far as if this is what we're trying to do, this is a vessel that maybe gets closer to that than anything outside of a non-man-made natural element. As
Mm.
far as like sculptural work, I mean, I've also planted trees on Corten steel. The ponderosa pine that was at the Pacific Bonsai Museum for the avant-garde exhibition that was planted in the light box that was made by an artist in Portland. I really think that bonsai has the ability to create very critical dialogue and contextual discussion. And I think the best example of that being verbalized was when Dave DeGroot did the audio critique of the President Hoover Larch that was in the Artisans Cup,
Uh, yeah.
which is still online, artisanscup.com. You can go listen to that critique of President Hoover in the vacuum. It's now on permanent collection at the Pacific Bonsai Museum. David Crust donated that piece. I think there was no more critical moment and decision in bonsai than that tree being in that show, opening the door for contextual dialogue, and Dave DeGroot's critique of that was so high level. He saw so far beyond bonsai the craft and really saw bonsai the art, which David
Mm.
Crust is a deep dude that thinks very, very cerebrally about what he does. It's highly intentional. And Dave DeGroot, just to summarize what he said, he basically said this is nature overcoming man-made things, and it's
Mm.
and it's unbelievable. And when I heard his critique, I was just like, like mind blown because it opened a new door. And like when I think about Benjamin Keating's work, it's like, yeah, here is a sculptor that's creating contextual vessels that you can bounce off of and create dialogue and critical narrative. We talk about bonsai being an art form, and there's this notion of should we use a traditional container? Is this thing? And it's just like that's
Yeah.
so elementary school for the narrative of if bonsai is art,
Yeah.
then like you need to start thinking, people need to start evolving and thinking about as the level of bonsai in the United States has grown and risen. You have more professionals that are capable of executing the traditional model on a high level, and yet they choose to do something different. The question is not, is that right or wrong, good or bad? Do I like it or not? The question is, what are they trying to say?
Mm.
That is the notion of bonsai as an art form. What is the intention? If that's not the question being asked, then we're still in elementary school.
Mm.
Like go work on your ABCs. Let's not talk about this until you're ready to speak in complete sentences because we're having a different conversation here. There's intention. What is this artist that has the capacity to create these other things with a high level of execution and decided to do this, saying in this contextual composition? That's where I think that stuff is so important. And it's opening the door, whether it's Horst Heinzelreiter creating contextual capacity with his ceramics and really artistic interpretations, Tom Benda, the Triskelly boys, the Third Wheel Potters artist residency at Marai, and what they opened the door for people to do with those ceramics, or it's sculptors and artists like Jonathan Cross and Benjamin Keating and any of these other individuals that are really pushing the envelope. It's like we got to raise our game as bonsai consumers to understand that this isn't a discussion of I'm a traditionalist, I'm a naturalist, or
Mm.
is this right or wrong? This is a discussion of this is somebody representing themselves and a critical statement about whatever that composition has to do with. And we need to be thinking, what are they trying to say?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's just at this point, we've got to see that people's level is high enough that there is intention behind that. And if you're not asking that, you're not looking hard enough. You're not thinking hard enough about it. You're not showing enough respect
Yeah.
to what's being done in the art form right now.
I agree in that realm because I feel like a lot of the time that I've dealt with people, and I'm not trying to bad talk anyone I've worked with or that's wanted to work with me or I've been able just to help out, whether it be students or anything. Um, we again, I think it comes back to culture. Being that we are Westerners, we're trying to find a craft before we know what the art truly is to us because we need to know how to get there. And in Japan, it's a cultural identity and based on the thing of like, at my wedding, we got married in 2020, we had bonsai there. And when Kumi was like, oh, this reminds me of my graduation, we had bonsai trees there too. I was like, oh wow, that's a whole nother concept I never even thought about. What a business model.
Yeah,
And
totally. The
you know,
Western mind right there.
Right, right. Capitalism. All right. No.
Yeah.
Um, it's one of those things where I have that kind of contemplation a lot of the time of like, how can I make my art better, but also understanding that the horticulture value is more and far greater than my own art that needs to be shown. And I think there's a dichotomy in that sometimes with a lot of people where either they know one or the other, and it's hard to mesh both because science to art can create, the science of art, but does art lead into science sometimes? How well of a benefit does it cause or does it take away?
I mean, it doesn't have to. I mean, that's the
Oh,
beauty of
right,
art is
yeah,
it,
yeah,
it doesn't have
yeah,
to, but it certainly could,
yeah,
and the science can create great art,
yeah.
and great art can open doors to science, but they don't
True.
have to. I think like
Yeah.
that's one of the beautiful things about art and about bonsai as this. I've always called it my peephole into the world. It's like
Mm.
looking through like a hotel door and seeing that hallway like all fisheye, and you see
Yeah.
people in activity and like all walks of life in the hallway of that hotel. But I'm just looking through this tiny little hole. It's like bonsai allows you to look at art. It allows you to look at design. It allows you to look at materials. It allows you to look at architecture. It allows you to look at literature and other forms of expression. It allows you to see the science. It allows you to see the conservation, naturalism, like the wild environment, the
Mm.
the the earth as a floating marble, like whatever it all relates ultimately, right? If you
Right.
can get to that point metaphorically to be able to extrapolate those connections of DNA. But um, I think, ultimately, when you talk about bonsai in its form as it is most commonly practiced, it is a craft, right? It is a
Hmm.
repetition of pattern. It is a repetition of technique. The application of wire is a technique associated with an execution of craft. And you say, okay, well, then what elevates craft to an art form? You have a mastery of that technique with a prolific body of work that gives you something to say, right? Like
Right.
that's my breakdown of craft to
Right.
art as I've talked with so many hundreds of artists and designers and architects and craftspeople. Like, what is the differentiator of those two? There's a lot of metal workers. Are they Richard Serra? No.
Mm. Yeah.
Like there's a lot of painters. Are they a Picasso or a Van Gogh? No.
Yeah.
And so it's like the people that are able to start to create critical dialogue with the compositions that they make have mastered the technique. They've produced a prolific body of work that has allowed them to dissect the fundamentals, the traditions, and to start to explore how that medium allows them to express themselves.
Mm.
And now they got something to say with what they make.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think we are at a point where that is happening more and more frequently. Like
Yeah.
I look back at the super critique from the Bonsai Society of Portland rendezvous that we covered
Oh
on
yeah.
Marai Live, and it's like
Hmm.
Greg Brendan is an artist first, craftsman second, right? Like
Yeah.
he
I
is
just thought of him when you were talking about that. I'm like, oh, hey,
totally,
Greg.
I mean, he
Wonderful
is
human being. Yeah.
total fantastic guy, tremendous artist. That spruce that he had in that super
Yeah.
critique was
Yeah.
was not, the question wasn't what wasn't where is the front,
Yeah.
because it wasn't trying to be a traditional bonsai. So now all of a sudden that question is out the door, going back
Yeah.
to like a natural form versus a traditional form. It's like, yeah, there's going to be a best viewing space for that tree to execute this elemental representation, but like his front was showing a critical common natural occurrence in that tree, and it was showing a timeline.
Mm.
It wasn't showing this after having happened hundreds of years ago. And so now all of a sudden he's taking you on this timeline with his composition where you can see this happening, and it happened recently,
Mm.
in terms of the broken tops and the way that he presented the branches and the fact that the reiterations had yet to form. He knows about reiterations. He knows about alpine forms. He knows about all of that stuff. So for him to present that and then the dialogue to be, well, I think this could be a better front and we could choose a better
Hmm.
pot. It was like, man, we missed it. We
Yeah.
missed it. And that's just, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, so I'm going to get off the soapbox on this. But you really triggered something with the J Cross and the Ben Keating work, because
Mm.
I
I
felt that
think it's
vibe.
where we're at though.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's where we're at. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
hey, y'all. like we got to up our level of what we're interpreting here, because
Yeah.
if we all say that this is an art form, well, this is it being practiced as an art, and the dialogue is if whether this is right or wrong, good or bad, and that's not what we're doing here.
So what you're saying is when we see a tree in exhibit, we should first ask, what is the artist trying to show, trying to say? And then we can go down the other rabbit holes of critique if we get past that point.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
totally.
That word critique though, that just gets me. It's like just discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
But are
yeah.
you going to be having these critical dialogues about trees being shown in your club show? Maybe.
Mm.
For the
Yeah.
advanced practitioners, maybe.
Mm.
Yeah.
Or are you going to be having these on a regional show? Maybe. For a few of the trees in that show, maybe.
Right.
On a
Mhm.
national level, are you going to be having these? Yes, there are going to be
Yeah.
compositions on a national level that are absolutely people tapping into an expression where instead of saying this is good or bad, does or doesn't hit all the key points of a good bonsai display in a Kokufu mimicked show model, they chose to use that space to say something else. Let's think about what that
Mm.
is, you know? And then I think when you see trees, and ultimately this is where I really started breaking away and doing personal exhibitions, because that's really the space. I mean, the tokonoma space, you know, in the alcove was a space to contemplate in Japanese bonsai. In the Western world, yeah, some people duplicate the tokonoma and try to fill it with all of the ornate accoutrements of a kakijiku or scroll and an accent piece or a kakemono, some like small little figurine, and say, okay, now I've done
Right.
display right. And it's like,
Right.
did you really express yourself? Are those elements that are reflective of you? Is that really what we're
Right.
doing here? Because
Mm.
for most people, Japanese elements,
Regurgitation, right?
yeah, it's not, it's like that's beautiful and you're trying to tap
Yeah.
into this cultural thing. That's totally fine. I have no
Yeah.
problem with that. Are you expressing yourself? You know, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
And that's really where I kind of found the alcove in the Western world to be architecture that had context. And then how do I
Mm.
play off of that architecture and context? And what trees do I choose to play off of that context? Whether it was the Portland Japanese Gardens or Wyden Kennedy, a brutalistic
Mm.
modern piece of architecture, or the lumber room, a really stark gallery setting, or the, you know, Skylab and the Artisan's Cup, and like all of that became the alcove that I identified with as as somebody born in the United States practicing bonsai inside of this context.
No, yeah, yeah, that hits a lot of notes because I've been thinking about that a lot, just as not having trees to play with or work on
Mm-hmm.
to the extent, but in those abilities to show in those different spaces, it also makes the argument for having more trees because you can do so many more things with more trees in the space that you're allowed to show in. You know,
Sure.
in another aspect too, I've always viewed, I grew up skateboarding, right? I saw bonsai. I remember I grew up in Tualatin, Oregon. I saw it at the Kmart parking lot right next to the Jiggles Tavern. That's no longer there. RIP Jiggles. And and
We miss you, Jiggles.
yeah, get your food voucher. Um, I remember seeing a white van, and then I didn't know that there was the Masa Furukawa's nursery right up the road. But I always felt this identity or this need to go to that energy, that spot on Terwilliger Curves that's now a cannabis dispensary and a strip club or something.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and then I found skateboarding. And I've always been in this mindset now to where I know skateboarders. I did that for got back into it now, but not as extent. I hate falling and hurting myself at 30, almost 40.
You are older now. Yeah, that hurts
Right.
worse
Little smarter
and heals
sometimes.
slower. Yeah.
Lay on the ground a little longer. Uh, I've always considered the ethos of skateboarding, this DIY art form for some, a craft for others, and this kind of personality as a whole thing, similar to that of bonsai.
Hmm.
And also the economy of it. Right now, if you look at skateboarding, it's in a lull. It's always based of this up and down, up and down. But then you have these figures like yourself, or I consider Kimura the Rodney Mullen of bonsai. You know, I'm sure we've all heard the name, maybe Rodney Mullen throughout Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, these video games. It's just been this identity of like, oh, there is so much more that needs to evolve over time. Because in the 60s, it started with surfing, and then it went to just skating on a curb, and then it went to this, and then Rodney Mullen came in, and then these people came about from Rodney Mullen. And you look at nowadays where it's just completely different than itself. And that will happen in bonsai. Do you think it will ever get there in our lifetime?
Ooh,
Get where?
that's the question, right? Get where? What is there? Where
Oh,
is there? Because wherever
yeah,
we
yeah,
envision there,
yeah.
it's not going to go there. I can
Right.
already
Yeah,
tell you
that's a
that.
good point. I guess let me rephrase. In the aspect of being able to, example, create a band that's still skateboard, but also be that punk ethos. and create a zine on the side. Do you think there's that ability to attain the best mastery of this craft to turn it into art, but also have these other outliers to express your art in different ways within the same art?
Oh, I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
Otherwise it just becomes locked inside a box, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I think inside of the United States, I think that was what Michael Hagedorn was saying when he said, you know, in Japan they function off the same artist statement and we function off
Mm.
of independent artist statements here. I think like if anywhere that's going to take place, I think it's going to be here, you know,
Yeah.
where we can broaden our perspective enough to appreciate these approaches for what the artist is trying to say without locking it in a box of whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, or
Yeah.
hits all the marks of what we're
Yeah.
quote unquote supposed to be doing, you know? But I don't know that like that looks like going to a show and everybody standing around going, what do you
Yeah.
think the artist is trying to say? You know, and like having
Snapping
this
fingers. Yeah,
esoteric
man. Yeah.
douchey art discussion of some, you know, like gallery represented in a movie from New
Yeah.
York where everybody's kind of wearing like you know monotone clothing
Yeah.
and is you know sipping their cocktail with their pinky out or something like I don't know what that looks like you know and I honestly don't really have a fantasy
Mm.
about what that looks like I think what I would hope is that there is more thought put into exhibitions that empower that to happen
Yeah.
and less value put on people assessing that situation for the
Yeah.
public to hear a quote unquote expert dialoguing about the pros and cons of this
Yeah.
piece because you're limited to the perspective of the individual that's sharing
Yeah.
information and forming a whole population that might be and truly is one perspective of that composition, you know?
Mm.
And I
Mm.
think that that's really where judging for me has been such like a it's been a ground to stake my flag on. It's a hill to die on to some degree, not to the point of you know self-sacrifice, but it's a hill to die on to say, hey, this is an important thing here if we're all going to put our money where our mouth is and practice bonsai as an art form, because judging is the fastest way to deteriorate a move in the artistic direction. And then you say, well then we shouldn't do judging, and it's like, no, I think judging is fine as long as you're able to objectively judge or find people that can objectively judge. And then people say you can't objectively judge, and I just disagree with that, quantifiably disagree with that. If it's not
Mm.
about what you like, it's about interpreting the power of the and the execution of a composition, then I think that judging demands a lot of rigor and attention
Mm.
and a lot of thought and background knowledge to be able to do it well. And how many people are putting in the time to be able to judge well? Like I don't know anybody that is training to judge bonsai, but I think to judge bonsai, you need to train to do it. I think you need to be
Mm.
trained and trained to do it. And it doesn't mean that you go train with a formulaic perspective. It means that you train by constantly trying to observe and broaden your understanding and awareness of
Yeah.
all things from the horticulture to the art to the tradition to the avant-garde to the materiality to the aesthetics to the intended aesthetics to the intended intention to the artist intention to knowing the people that are showing. And people say, well then that creates bias. It's not about your best friend. It's not about the tree that you like. It's
Yeah.
about what piece accomplishes the
Yeah.
greatest execution
Yeah.
of aesthetic standard and demonstration of the highest level of the art,
Yeah.
which means it comes with intention.
Well, that also goes too with the idea of I think we're limiting ourselves to just one art form to get inspired by a lot of the time
Mm,
because you look at poetry, you look at painting, those go very cohesively. You look
mhm,
at other things where we can do that, but I think we're not in an infantile state anymore, in my opinion. You know, Chase Rosade and I talked about that a lot. He's like, no, we're far beyond the infantile state. We're probably,
for
he said,
sure.
more than likely teenage years into college.
Mhm,
Getting to know ourselves and finding our identities every day is something different. You know, world is a fish tank. We're the fish in the tank. And it's this like comprehension where I've always tried to find the outsource of my art, but I need to get there because there's something in me that wants to express it, but it's going to be completely opposite of what people think. Do I care what they say? No. Am I a competitive person? Yes. But do I care about sports? Sometimes. Within the relation of back to skateboarding, right? It's now considered a sport. To some people, it's an art. It's been the Olympics. It's
Mhm.
it's it's on the world stage. I guess what I'm saying is you have to create a bonsai video game, be the next Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Hmm.
You know,
People
and
throw that at me all the time. Like, if you
right,
gamify this, it'll be more economically feasible. It's like, if I
Uh,
gamify this, I can go ahead and walk away from bonsai right now. That's not what I'm
right.
doing here.
And then you just put yourself on a t-shirt. It's like, oh, cool image.
Hmm.
You know, and
Hmm.
it's one of those things where I think, what's that expression? Master of none, da 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 da. You
Oh,
know, uh,
jack of all trades, master
oh
of
yeah,
none.
yeah,
yep.
yeah. There's always that extra part on the end that's left off. You know, and I think that's where we're at in our bonsai theme or sense in the country. As I've met a lot of people across the country now, met people in Japan, Europe, what have you. There's this interesting complexity to where people are trying to figure out who they are, but not knowing where to go to get there. And, you know, it's a really hard thing to battle because we're always there, especially as we're starting young. You know, I go back to childhood, right? I think about what did I want to do then that has come into fruition now or completely left. It's that infancy of bonsai. You get into it, you go really deep, you go really hard, and then you get to a point like where I'm at right now, where I've gotten paid to do certain things. I'm like, what does that mean now? It's not just a hobby anymore. It's
Hmm.
it's not economical for my living yet. If it turns into that, but you know what I'm saying? It's this duality with the dichotomy.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, I always find the people that create the most unique work um, to care the least about what other people think. Like,
yeah.
but I also find the people that create the best work to be the most competitive. But it
Mm.
doesn't mean that you're competing with what other people think or what other people do. Like, um,
Is it more competing against yourself?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it is holding yourself accountable. And I also think when you start to do that, there is a real deconstruction of the ego,
Yeah.
which is to say, like, it's not hard to say that Peter T makes the best ramification in bonsai right now.
Mm.
It's not hard to say that Mario Comstock can get more fine twigging out of a deciduous tree than any other Western bonsai practitioner
Mm.
in the most extreme aesthetics. I mean, like his famous Korean hornbeam that has all the branches weeping and they're still as ramified as the upper apical region of the
Mm.
tree. You tell me somebody else that can do that. Like,
Mm.
when you're competing with yourself to be the best that you can be, it's not hard to give everybody else their flowers. And I think that's a big part of judging,
Mm.
because it's not hard to say, I may not like that, but that is a significant accomplishment and deserves recognition. And
Right.
I think it's also a lot easier to follow your own path and be able to look at other bonsai and other people's work with a more open mind of being completely blown away and impressed, instead of deflecting the fantastic work that they're doing to try and salvage your own ego because you can't do the same thing. And I really
Right.
think that that's probably at the base root in the Western world, particularly, and I don't see it as dominant in Europe as I do in the United States, but particularly about trying to put everything into a box and say, is it right or wrong, good or bad, etc. I really think it's a deflection of the ego of like, fuck, I can't do that. I would never have
Yeah.
done that. I would never have seen
Yeah.
that. I don't know how to do that. And I don't know how I feel about it. And so I'm going to go ahead and take that insecurity and I'm going to vocalize it as a criticism.
Yeah.
There are certainly things that are validly critiqued, and as a professional, if you're not critiquing yourself, then you're not doing your job.
Right.
That which is where I think people that create the most interesting things are the ones that are the most competitive, and they're the hardest on themselves,
Yeah.
and they also care the least about what somebody else is going to say about it. So
Right.
like in terms of the dichotomy, I don't see it as much as a dichotomy, because I think once you move into a space with a mastery of craft and a prolific body of work, I think all of the other stuff kind of falls in line
Mm.
in terms of developing something to say, because you've already exercised all of the ego out of yourself in that prolific body of work, to know like, wow, that's really hard to do. That's like pretty admirable. That's incredibly beautiful. That's incredibly innovative. I have definitely found the more trees that I make at Marai, the more that I respect other artists' work that really break through and accomplish fantastic things. Because it's like, I
Mm.
know what it takes to do that. It's fucking hard, right? And there's
Yeah.
a lot of failure, and there's the success in that is something to celebrate. Like that, if you're judging a show and you have not produced a prolific body of work, I don't think you have grounds to judge because you haven't exercised out the ego that's going to skew your impression of that thing, you know? And if you haven't mastered
What
the
you want from
craft,
that tree, right?
yeah, and if you haven't mastered the craft and you don't know how hard it is to get this species to branch like that or horticulturally do this, how are you ever going to be able to appreciate the effort and what you're bearing witness to when you're looking at that tree on prime display at a peak of its current aesthetic existence? Like that's important stuff to validate, man.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's what runs through my head a lot these days as I have more time to think being a full-time dad, but also having learned so much just from my daughter growing up as a child and seeing how she interacts with life now and how she does art. She loves painting now. And I was like, there's a part of like as a parent, like, but wait, no, no, pull back. That's hers. That's hers.
Yeah, that's not
That's
yours. That's
hers.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
would do it different, but I'm a grown ass man. I wipe my own ass.
Dude, kids, kids, kids,
You know,
kids break your kids break your ego down. And like speaking about the ego and bonsai and stuff, like it's valuable. It's not
yeah.
to demonize, the ego. Like
Well, you need
everybody's
some of
got it.
it, you know, you
You
need
gotta
some of
have
it
it.
to survive
You
because
got well, and you need some of it to stand proud with what you make and
yeah.
create. If you've exercised all of that self-competitiveness and you've broken yourself down and assessed and you have a piece that you're willing to put out there in public,
Mhm.
you need to stand proud with that piece. That's representing you. That's representing all of that painful deconstruction. And and the ego is important there. Like you can't
Yeah.
stand there and be like, I hope this is okay. It's like, no, you know what? This is what I'm trying to say, and this is what I'm doing here. And
Yeah.
and take it or leave it, like it or not, I couldn't care because like I feel good about this. This is representing me.
Right.
Like that is important to present your work, I think, to present your work
Right.
at that stage. And if it's not at that stage, it's not time, you know?
Right. And that will show, it will come across because the energy of that space or composition or how you just even position the tree. It's like, here you go, boop, you know?
And when you get
Yeah.
that, when you
Yeah.
get that from somebody, when you get to sit there and see that from
Yeah.
somebody, that's powerful stuff,
Yeah.
man.
If you're
That's
connected to it, right? You got to be ready to
oh,
see
look,
it.
search the hey, listen, Sergio Kwan's
Dude,
Yatsubusa Elm in the
th-
national show,
that just got taken, I think, to Longwood
Longwood.
Guard. Yeah,
Yeah,
Kevin
he put
Bilecki.
it on his
Go on
social.
that.
Dude,
That's great stuff
I
there.
I I didn't get to see it in person, which
Mm.
I'm
Yeah.
regretful of, but I'm glad it's going to be in a public space where I can see it in person.
Hmm.
But like, ah man, the fact that that tree wasn't recognized just like totally breaks my heart because that's a moment with that tree right there on
Yeah. It hold
display
it,
for the
it hold
first
its own.
time.
Yeah.
You're never going to see another one like it. You're never
Yeah.
going to see that. For people that got to see that in person to not cherish that moment, opportunity to see a tree at that point in that context and space, like you don't get that back. You don't get that
Yeah.
opportunity back.
Yeah,
Did you
Houston,
take that in?
it was his first time at the national show this year.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The whole
Good
context of it,
timing.
like you don't get that back. You don't get Sergio's first gesture
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
public like that again. And he
Like
used
a
that
first
tree
date, you know? You never get a
in
first
that
date
mo
back.
yeah, you never get that back. You never get
Hmm.
that back. It's like when you see artists create something, their first like I have a few now Tokutake pots that were from like when he very first started, and
Mm-mm.
they're rough and they're, wonky and asymmetrical. It's
Hmm.
like you never get that back. You never get the
Yeah.
first pots back. You never get the first trees back. You never get that first gesture back. Like when you're in that moment, having the ability to see that thing, to not value all of that context, you never get to do that again. Are you kidding me? That was a moment with that tree. I hope people understand and value that. Like, and that's not to pick that out as the only one. I'm sure there were multiple trees that were in that state. Did anybody actually consider like, wow, this is Sergio's first time as one of the top level North American bonsai practitioners, arguably one of the better deciduous practitioners globally.
Mm.
And he is presenting his coup de grace to deciduous aesthetics right now for the first time for him for this tree at this exhibition. Did anybody even think about that when they looked at that tree? I would almost guarantee you nobody looked that deeply, or very few people did.
Or a lot of
Mm.
people might not have known that deeply also. Like I knew of Sergio as an artist and I've seen his pictures online and knew he was at a very high level, but I don't know every bonsai artist in the world. So I have, I guess, a harder time comparing and saying, okay, this is the peak of his work or of deciduous bonsai, you know?
Yeah, and maybe I'm not saying it's the peak of his work of deciduous bonsai. I'm saying that's the
Mhm.
first time that he showed a tree, and he just showed an absolute banger. I
One of
mean,
the
he
one
just
of the
Yep.
peaks.
Yep.
he just dropped a diamond on everybody. Were they able to see it? Like they see the polish
Yeah.
and the luster on that thing? I mean, that was impressive. Even from a picture, it was like, well,
Yeah.
hats off to you, Sergio. I know what
Yeah.
it takes to cultivate a Yatsubusa elm to look like that, and I can tell you that was at the very top of horticulture and aesthetics right there. For that species to get to that level with what it started as and where it's at is insane. And I don't think it was recognized.
Mhm.
Mm.
And it was a huge tree. Like
It held
I
its
feel
own.
like on the
Yeah.
table it was probably taller than I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
He
it
had a
was a
different appreciation in person for
monster through
sure.
and through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Monster through and through. That tree is insane.
You know, Ryan, we talked a lot about how you are as a person and how you live now. What before bonsai in your childhood or anything, like what jobs, what things in life gave you the ability to just push through the bullshit and just get on? I mean, I know you did, and you've talked about this before. We've talked about it past. Basketball was your big part. You saw the magazine,
Yeah.
but like, what about your childhood? You know, was it from your dad? Was it what advice did your parents give you? What makes you go still? You know, because we always
Yeah.
rely on that one thing
Yeah.
for many things.
Well, I mean, I was really blessed with two fantastic parents. I mean, my
Oh
mom and
yeah.
dad are salt of the earth.
Mm,
My dad grew up the son of a ranch hand on the flat tops of western Colorado, so he grew up until 16 working on a ranch. My grandpa was a World War II veteran on Angio
mm,
Beach, so he was one of a few people that survived D-Day
mm,
from that location. And my grandma was like a one-room school teacher that taught all grades, kindergarten through 12th grade until they
mm.
moved into town. And they moved into town so that my dad could go to high school. So like it was a
Oh,
very, I grew up in almost like a very rural blue collar ranching kind of style, even though my dad ultimately did other things with his professional life. But I had like a very deeply rooted hardworking sort of upbringing where I was
mm,
always helping chop wood and do all of the labor and stuff, which I really appreciated. But I didn't know my grandpa. He died before I had memory, so I didn't really get the rub from him. But there were three Italian brothers named the Durrett brothers that operated a restaurant called the Italian Underground in
mm,
my very small town, Glen Springs, Colorado. And the Durrett brothers had worked for my grandfather at his gas station when my dad's family moved into town, and my grandpa being a World War II vet, he was a real no bullshit kind of guy. And the Durrett
yeah.
brothers
Of
were
course.
apparently quite the
Yeah.
handful as like these, Italian
The
immigrant
Italians,
boys. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And so my grandpa was really hard on them. And I actually started working at the Italian Underground when I was like 11 or 12, which technically
Gonna
wasn't
say
totally
it's
legal.
some forged
Um,
paperwork.
yeah, but at that time in that small town with that
Yeah.
family connection, like they
Yeah.
let me start working there as a busboy, and they worked my ass off. And not
Yeah.
only did they work my ass off, they were very vocal towards me about my work ethic, my mannerisms, how
Mm,
I handled the job. Um, in ways that only a rancher and a blue collar sort of World War II vet could be. For example, Gregory, who's passed away, rest in peace, he was a really significant mentor to me. I remember one time I was holding my fork like this instead of like this, and we were eating like family meal afterwards. And he said, "You look like some of those cocksuckers in the slop bin in the military. Don't be a cocksucker." Like that was kind of how he talked to me
yeah.
on the
Yeah.
side outside of like client, like turn
Yeah.
that fucking table quicker than you can, like
Yeah.
it was just very like rugged.
Authentically loving.
Yeah, but there was affection there. And so
Yeah.
like the hard work was sort of familially born in. Um my own motivation to be the best that I could be, my parents said that I sort of came out of the womb with. Like I knew what I wanted from a very young age before bonsai. Like if I got into something, I went deep and I wanted to do it to the best of my ability. But I think the indomitable spirit that it has taken to weather the apprenticeship and the things that I've experienced, and not saying I'm like exceptional or anything, but that's what's allowed me to get through these things, and it's also um, kind of what's continued to drive me is I still have this unrealized mission, which is to see how good I can be at bonsai.
Right. Yeah, you know, and Karate Kid plays probably into that somewhere too.
I mean, I like seeing the martial arts. I think
All
martial
jokes
arts is,
aside, but
yeah, I think martial arts, like particularly Taekwondo for me, and my Taekwondo instructor's name was Rocky Barrows, and his dad owned a bodybuilding gym right next door to the Taekwondo gym, and they were just like super solid, salt of the
yeah.
earth people that demanded a lot. So I was really surrounded by a lot of people that did not give a lot of grace when you weren't doing your best,
Hmm.
and were happy to tell you about it in some pretty rugged ways. And once I got to Japan, that was ultimately sort of Mr. Kimura's mission, was getting the best out of his apprentices,
Yeah.
and he honestly wasn't that nice about it. But that
Yeah.
wasn't new to me. It was just from a different angle of this foreign perspective of a culture that I didn't understand. And I think that's where I took some hits until I acclimated to that.
Yeah.
And then I was able to make sense of it. And then when it all kind of flipped on its head, after my apprenticeship, that's when I was really caught off guard. Because in the United States, you'd think like you broke bread together, you guys are going to be friends or respect each
Yeah.
other, have this relationship. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's not the
Yeah.
way it works
Yeah.
there. And that's not how it worked. And I wasn't ready for that. I didn't know that that was a thing, that like you could go through that together. And then afterwards, it's like, all right, you're a foreigner again. Get the fuck out of here.
Mm.
It's like, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's real rugged.
Yeah. I not in the same boat, but I can be right on the same river. With that empathy there, where I had friends from Japan that I thought were friends. You go to Japan and be like, oh no. Well, like, oh, that's
Oh,
that's
yeah,
different. Like you don't tell
exactly.
someone you could stay at their house and then be like, no, sorry. I'm like, not to an
Mm.
American.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, it's just
You know,
different. It's not wrong or right.
yeah.
There's no
It's just
judgment. It's
cultural.
just
Yeah.
I wasn't
Yeah.
I wasn't equipped for that, you
I
know.
don't think you ever are though until you get into it. You know, similarly to people coming to the US and figuring out what the US really is. Because you can watch a movie, you can taste the food, you can read a book, but until you're living in the full congruent thing,
Yeah.
the petri dish, if you will, of the science experiment that has to grow whatever it's going to grow,
Hmm.
you don't really know. I mean, you can speak the language, but sociologically, you have to really live in the thick of it to
Yeah.
really get to
The
know it.
culture
And
was
even
harder than the
then,
language. The culture was harder than the
100%.
language. Yeah.
Because it's also in comparison, you know, I talked about this with Michael Hagedorn a while back. There's more left unsaid, even culturally, than it is said, to where it's all that balance of reading the air more than what's even said before it's said. And it's
Correct.
like,
Space between the lines,
oh,
man.
so it's like cooking and having to have this sinuous relationship with your other cooks or chefs to know what needs to be fired before it's called.
Hmm.
And same with the bonsai. It's like you have to know what season's going to happen or read the air for the heat
Hmm.
wave that's coming. You know,
Exactly.
the water before a freeze. You know, it's always like, okay, you know, why not? You know,
It's it's a gift though. I mean, when
yeah,
you're given that awareness of the space between the notes, or the quiet between the notes, or the space between the lines, or
yeah,
you start to recognize there's things that exist inside of the unspoken and the unwritten and
mm,
and the non-visual that are equally as valuable, if not more powerful. Like that's
right,
really the strength of Japanese culture, is the value system put around the restraint,
yeah,
which
intention, yeah,
drives, honestly could drive an American crazy, because we say
yeah,
everything. We speak our mind. That's what you're
yeah,
supposed to do.
yeah,
Communicate, communicate,
yeah,
communicate. Stand up for yourself.
yeah.
Yes, you
I'm
can.
me. This is me. Yeah,
Totally. And it's
yeah.
like that didn't work well there.
Yeah, I think there's also a thing too, as American. I mean, I'm almost 40 now, have a kid, it changes you like we've talked about numerous times in this conversation. Ryan and I talked, Ryan, Houston's in a PhD program, so it's similarly the
Mm.
same fashion where you have
That's
your,
my child right now.
that's a big child.
Cultivating
But,
a
you know,
baby.
it's one of these things where I was born in blue collar. I've worked blue collar. We've talked about this before, Ryan, you know, and this idea of like, I never felt like I could say I didn't know how to do something because I always had to know. But
Mhm.
in Japan, there's that idea where it's okay to say I don't know because you need to know how to get there. And
In fact, it is
it's required.
expected. It's expected that you're going to
Yeah,
say you don't know if you don't know. And as an
yeah.
American, you go and you're expected to say you do know or you can, even
Figure it
if you
out.
don't, and
Yeah,
then figure it
yeah,
Mm.
out. And
yeah,
that was I learned
yeah.
that was the wrong way to go about it.
And
Mm.
you know, having a partner be able to be that way, I've learned so much in that aesthetic of like, oh, I don't have to know everything right now about this tree. Oh, I don't have to know everything about this art form to get there. I need that tells me I need to do more research. I need to expect to find people that can help me get there.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we're getting there as a community, specifically in bonsai and art, because without that, we're just fumbling our own feet and not knowing one foot in front of the other. You know, soon you'll be walking out the door, as that Christmas movie says. You know,
I
and
think that's a
you
huge
know,
sign of a professional too. Is a
yeah,
professional to say I don't really know, you know?
yeah, and
Mm.
I've kind of always been there, just in relation. Like Houston and I talked about it a lot because we started the first ever bonsai club at Ohio State ever in the existence of the school.
The university, yeah.
Ohio State, yeah, the Ohio State University, because trademark,
Mm.
watch out. And uh, we ran into a lot of students that were like, "Do you know this?" I'm like, "I don't know, but let's learn it together." And that empowered them more to want to go find more and then completely go in a different way. Maybe they never touch it again, maybe they never do it, but that little split of time
Yeah.
allowed them to see that we're all human. We don't know everything. We can't know everything. I mean, that's insane to think you do.
Mm.
And I don't want to say it's ego, but maybe it's just cultural competency.
Something.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
part of being an American for sure is
Yeah.
saying I don't know is a
Wear it on
foreign
our
thing for a
sleeve.
lot of yeah, and that's not to say that's not to universally blanket American culture like that or culture in the United States, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
certainly I think it's a weak point of for a lot of us
Yeah.
and something to be
Yeah.
worked on, you know, because like as a bonsai professional, if you can't say that you don't know, then what you do know is I think it invalidates what you do know, you know, because it's like
Yeah.
Mm.
if you tell
Yeah.
somebody something that's bullshit and then they do it, then it's like, well, what else did he say that's
Yeah.
bullshit?
And that's on you.
Al
Yeah. Yeah.
almost the most credible thing to say when you don't know is I don't know to be able to empower what
Yeah.
you do know to have that power and confidence.
Yeah. And that's probably, I mean, not to put words in your own mouth. Was that one of the most surprising things that you learned through your career? That having that open, honest ability has helped your students get better quicker?
Yeah, for sure. I think so before I ever recorded Marai live, I made a bunch of instructional videos that the world will never see, you know, and like when I
Highest
was
bidder. Highest bidder.
when I and it's abysmal, but I was learning to be on camera. I was learning to
Yeah.
educate. Like when
Mm.
I started my first class, my first lecture was like 20 minutes long back in 2011.
Mm.
I learned so much about bonsai trying to teach other people bonsai, which is a common theme of
Yeah.
teaching is you learn what you don't know.
Exactly.
And inside of that, once I was able to learn how to organize my thoughts and like create a curriculum that was able to convey the knowledge to students in a concise and succinct way, and over the course of time build in all of the bumper rails of all of the different
Mm.
factors that can change the outcome or change the
Mm.
approach, it became so much easier to be like, I don't really know because
Mm.
there was enough. I felt confident in what I had enough to be like, I have enough here. I am valuable. Like what I'm saying does have value. I had enough of that confidence in the knowledge that I had created and the way that I was able to convey it to be able to say, yeah, I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
great question. You know, and then that creates kind of the next tangent of knowledge to go dig into, not because I don't want to say I don't know the next time, but because genuinely, if I don't know, I'm gonna want to know.
Right.
And I think that kind of curiosity has really driven me. I mean, the regenerative agronomical nutritional thing, like the whole reason that I went through all of this nutrition and stuff is because I didn't know why certain trees were doing certain
Yeah. I
things.
mean, that
And I
shit's heavy,
wanted,
man.
oh, it's super gnarly, you know, like why are the tips of a Rocky Mountain juniper turning brown on certain branches in the middle of spring? And why is it
Mm,
shedding its needles in a wrong time of year? And why did all the 2-year needles fall off? And why are the midsection of the tree yellow and the top and bottom are green? Like these are great horticultural conundrums of bonsai that I can guarantee you nobody can actually answer.
mm,
Uh, and I was not satisfied with that because it was
mm,
happening and nobody could tell me what was going on, and that means I couldn't fix it, you know?
mm,
And so digging into it was a quest for the answer, and it just took me into such a deep, deep realm of physiology and science that it really became a new incubator and breeding ground for concepts and aesthetics and ideas and approaches. And that each time that I go down those like super deep rabbit holes, I come out being able to see with more peripheral vision and appreciate more broadly what
mm.
people are able to accomplish in their trees, which
Yeah.
I do think serves the role of judging and serves the role of teaching and serves the role of creating. To have that breadth and that depth to your pond is like it's like building an heirloom soil in the garden. Like people talk about the vegetable that's grown, but it's really the quality of the soil. And to build good soil it might take 20 years to build heirloom
Right.
soil. And then when you leave that garden, taking that soil is the most valuable thing you could take. No
Yeah.
single plant outweighs the biology of that soil. So like once I get into that realm, it just like it's like an atomic bomb, that mushroom
Yeah.
clouds. Like
Yeah.
the metaphors and the extrapolation of one thing about a scientific discovery becomes a realization about the world that I live in and my reality that has really enriched my life well beyond what trying to say is this right or wrong, or is the traditional model good or bad, or how do I style a tree. It's like, the power of this art form, the power of these trees in this containerized environment, in the soil necessities of that limited gravity column, and all of the conundrums horticulturally and scientifically that we're starting to tackle does create an artistic approach where science is now breeding art, and does create a metaphorical value to the effort that we're putting in, and blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, it's very easy to get to this realization that bonsai can save the world,
Mm,
because
mm.
there are very few things that have that kind of power. There are
It's
very
funny you
few
say
things in
that.
life that have that
Yeah.
kind of power, where
Yeah.
they can literally teach you about every aspect of life on a tangible, identifiable level, and bonsai can.
It's funny you say that 'cause that's been going through my mind this whole since I moved to this town I'm at. Like, how can bonsai save my life, but also the world?
Mm.
Yeah,
Because it
it
saved it more
can.
than once. You know, it
It
saved it more than
can.
once.
And it
Got me
might
into school.
save everybody in a different way, and that's the
Hmm.
power of it, like that's the
Yeah.
value of it.
Getting back to nature.
Yeah.
Sure,
Another
that might be
challenge
one
for all
way,
the
you know?
listeners is try to find how you can use bonsai
To
to,
save the world.
yeah, in your
Yeah.
own way, communicate something that's important to you, or like we were talking about before, or teach something to yourself or to those around you, anything like that. I've heard
Yeah.
you talk about this idea a number of times in your podcast before, Ryan. I have a certain kinship with anyone who has that view because as Kevin said, we're all thinking like that. So I kind of wonder if this is the inevitable conclusion of anybody practicing bonsai is like seeing those connections and the potential there, or if it's just a subset of people that are crazy enough to think that. Haven't found that out yet, but
I think it actually goes beyond bonsai to just the organism of the tree.
Mm.
When I was walking through Great Basin National Park, the Magic Grove, which is easily the most remote grove of ancient bristlecone pines on planet Earth. And I was super lucky to be there with Brian Smithers, who's a researcher um, from Montana State, highly, highly knowledgeable about bristle. Maybe the foremost expert. I don't really know. I can't lob that out there, but I have lobbed that out there. But I want to rescind that and just acknowledge that I don't
We'll,
know
we'll
what
edit
he's
that
like.
out.
Yeah. Well, no, don't worry about it. I
I
mean,
know.
like
Yeah.
he is at the top of his
Yeah.
field in bristlecone pine
Yeah.
research, and inevitably we're like sitting in this grove, and Josh Sales is filming us and recording us, and the team was there, and we were really kind of like dissecting Brian's knowledge and talking about these ancient trees. All of them led to like esoteric discussions about our existence
mm,
and the meaning of life and all of these like bigger concepts we were existing in. No conversation was safe from deviating
Mm.
into this discussion of like what it's all about, what it means, and the value that we derive from being present with these trees and looking at them and trying to understand them. It all led to self-reflection.
Yeah.
And like I I was really moved by that because I think you see the individual in a bonsai tree, but I've never been in a space where the conversation, science, culturally, uh, topographically, geographically, geologically, all led to like, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here?
Huh.
What
Yeah.
is our purpose? Kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
every single conversation ended up there. And it wasn't just like I was in a deep mood or Brian was in a deep mood. We were literally there to look at trees and talk trees, and that's where it ended up. And I think that's where I say it's not just the bonsai tree, like trees in general. If it, when you think about being the descendant of primates, in our primal mind, the tree was home and the tree was safety. Like
Mm.
from the moment you're born, you better find a tree or you're not going to last long. And that continues to, I think, be the case, however much we want to reject that, deny that, or we're not knowledgeable that that is the case because we're sheltered in a built environment. But the tree is our number one orator that bridges us to the landmass. Like it tells you everything that's happened over thousands of years. However old the tree is, you have that much history visually if you know how to interpret it. And that is a powerful thing to know the ground that you stand on by something that's bridging the gap of time.
Mm.
And so like when I look at trees and I feel like, yeah, trees can save the world, and bonsai can save the world and stuff, as ridiculous as it sounds, it probably really ultimately does go back to, our ultimate beginning and
Yeah.
what has continued to foster life on Earth.
That leads me to my final question because we've been talking for 2 hours.
Yeah,
This has been a
yeah.
great
Which has flown
conversation.
by.
You
Good,
should have
good, good
known.
talk
You should
today.
have known
I
when
already
we
knew.
got into this was gonna happen, Kevin.
I didn't preface this to Ryan or Houston. No, it sounds like a very ethereal kind of intimate space where it's just that delicacy, but also the availability to have that open air talk because you were
Mhm.
in the ether of the tree. You were brought back to that space. I strive for that in my own understanding of where I'll be living next after this time I'm here, what have you. That's getting into the woo-woo, but yeah.
Yeah,
um
go there. I'm all about woo-woo.
yeah. My hippy dippy life, Oregon. You
We
can take
talked
it.
about trees talking to us, so we're already deep in the woo-woo, you
Yeah,
know?
we're in the
I,
woo-woo.
I
Yeah, we
always
were in
say
the
you can
woo-woo
take the
from the
boy,
beginning today.
the boy
Mm.
out of Oregon, not Oregon out the boy.
That's right. That's right.
Um, recently, one of the most recent podcasts you did, you talked about, yourself. What I heard you say was, I don't think I'll be doing bonsai forever. And
Hmm.
then when you get there, two questions here in one. If you weren't doing bonsai now, what would you be doing? And if you ever chose to leave bonsai behind, where would your energy go next?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people have asked me if I wasn't doing bonsai, what would I be doing?
Probably hate that question, but
And no, I don't hate that question at all because it does make me think. There was like two times I thought about quitting my apprenticeship, and there's probably been three or four times that I've thought about quitting Marai and being a bonsai professional. So I have actually thought really hard about it. And in the early years when I hit some significant obstacles and thought about quitting bonsai as a profession, I thought, oh, I'll be an architect. And as I've
Mm,
learned more and more about architecture and architects, I really admire what good architects are able to do and how they're able to synthesize the built environment and merge it with design to enhance people's experience. But I have a bigger and bigger problem with the built environment. So I don't think I would be able to do that with a moral and ethical, clear conscience. And then
mm,
I thought, I would be a stonemason because I
mm.
love working with rocks and I like the natural material and I like trying to, again, very thematically, recreate and abstract natural moments in artificial spaces that give people the ability to be transported. But then, to make a living as a stonemason, you also end up stacking bricks and
Yeah.
doing a lot
There
of,
go, there goes your
unnatural
back.
things. Yeah. And so, in the most recent sort of come to Jesus moment that I've had with my career and profession and path of life choice. Um, I actually did not have an answer for that.
Mm,
And as I've evolved and where I've evolved to, I don't think that it's an option any longer.
mm,
I think I'm too deep into it. It's become my reference point for the world and for
right.
life and that's not to say like I am my career because it's very different than that.
Yeah.
It's I know too much I know too much to go back,
Mm,
unfortunately and fortunately. And I had this experience in my apprenticeship. Like I was sitting there wiring like maybe 8 or 9 months into my apprenticeship, and I realized it was just this random thought that popped into my head. I can never go back to doing juvenile, terrible
yeah.
bonsai and feeling
Yeah.
great joy and pleasure out of it because I know
Yeah.
too much. I don't know
Like,
enough to be good, but I know too much to go back to
yeah.
that and get the joy out of it. I now
Yeah.
know too much
Yeah.
about this world, the natural world, and the power of these beings, organisms that are these trees, whether they're natural or large or small or bonsai or not. Like, I know too much, but I don't know enough to be at peace with
Yeah.
the whole thing. And so, I really do romanticize. Being free of the burden that I've put myself under, taking
Mm,
on the life and the profession and the pursuit and the lifestyle that I have, where I never really just get to enjoy a hot day. I
mm.
never get to go to
Yeah.
the coast when it's 100
Yeah.
degrees. I don't get
Mm,
to go to the mountains and go fishing when it's there's a storm coming or any of the other experiences that I really envy a lot of people having the ability to freely move with a modality that lacks a living organism depending on
yeah.
them that can't feed itself,
Yeah.
So like I do want that freedom at some point. And I also just had like a really powerful experience. I was with a long-term student of mine this past weekend and he was trying to divest himself of his entire collection and
Oh, wow.
there was not enough room in the truck for it. And like he had hit the point where he was like, I'm ready to have this freedom. And when we couldn't load his trees into the truck, he was like, maybe this is a sign that I'm supposed to keep doing this. And he about faced immediately and I was just like, wow,
Hmm.
that was a powerful moment to be part of, not because I was like, oh my God, this just reset my understanding of bonsai or anything like that. It was just like, man, these moments in life, like how you choose to perceive them and accept them and keep
Yeah.
moving forward, um, really determine your experience. And I've always admired this particular, what someone I would call a tremendous friend. I've always admired his ability to adapt and roll with the punches and find the good in things. And watching him maybe secretly feeling a little bit of joy and anticipation of the freedom, and
Yeah.
then immediately
Yeah.
being like, maybe I'm supposed to keep doing this. I'm gonna keep
Make
them.
the
Who
call.
knows?
Sorry,
Next,
honey.
yeah, it was wild, and I was just like, I'm gonna take some of that with me.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Like I just watched him handle that in a way that was admirable and
Mm,
respectable. So, anyways,
yeah.
I don't know what I would do.
That's
And I
fair. That's fair.
romanticize having the freedom, but who knows if I'll ever actually get there.
Well, in every iteration of career changes where you go maybe more one way than the other and have some more time to freely do things you want to do on the weekends, Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I have
You get old
apprentices
enough, your
now.
back's only so strong.
Well, that's what they make a dingo for. I have apprentices
Yeah.
now, and I think at some point, like I look at Mr. Kimura in his 80s, still just like crushing,
So,
and his work
yeah.
is different than it was when I was there. And
Mhm.
it's like I think he will probably legitimately do bonsai till he dies, which a
Yeah.
lot of Japanese um
I mean, that's Chase
sh
Rosé right there. He said, I want to
shokunins.
die sitting in my chair with my scissors in my front of my favorite tree. I was like, cool, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. I don't have that same feeling now, but I might when I'm Chase's age,
Right.
if I make
90.
it
Yeah.
that far. Yeah,
Yeah.
if I make it
Yeah.
that far. Yeah. Yeah, who knows? Time will tell.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you, man. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I'm glad
We
we got
You're
to
all
do it.
welcome.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Houston
Both
and
Ryans.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
But yeah, thank you, Ryan.
I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk,
Yeah.
and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks for going
Kevin.
deep, man.
Yeah,
I
you
missed
had
you. I
to.
missed you, man. You know, I was like,
For sure. For sure. It's been too long.
next time I'm back in town, I'll hit you up.
Come on out. Mariah's always home.
The Bonsai Time podcast has been horticulturally crafted by Kevin Faris, Ryan Huston, and Kelly Louie. And if you want even more bonsai magic, don't forget to check out the episode notes and full show extras at bonsaitimepodcast.com. If you're loving the show, help us grow like a thriving juniper. Like, subscribe, share, and spread the bonsai love. Got questions, ideas, or fan mail? Send it to bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. Your message might make it onto a future episode. We're everywhere you scroll. Just search Bonsai Time Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And catch our TikTok snips at Bonsai Time Pod. Follow the team on Instagram at Kevin_Ferris Bonsai, at Bonsai with Kelly, and Ryan at Invivo Bonsai, and InvivoBonsai.com. Thanks for tuning in. Keep pruning, keep growing, and always bonsai on.